Olivier, we're back to P1. Doing a good job. Front foot nice, smooth left. It's coming to the end of EGX 2015, which is a shame. Sad faces all round, and yet we have a brilliant final here with ESL and Project Cars at the NEC in Birmingham. My name is Matt Andrews, and we are about to bring you our race final. We've been having time trials all day here at EGX 2015, and these are our 4 best drivers. We've got them right here. They've been clocking up our time trials. You 4 guys are our fastest drivers of the day. John, let's start with you. John, you played Project Cars before?
I've played it for a long time, since release.
Did you have it on day 1?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And then we've got Andre here. Andre, what's your favourite car to drive in Project Cars?
I think I'd say McLaren 12C GT3. I love that the cornering there. It's really good. Love the power as well.
Okay, good. This is going to be a fast competition, I'm quite sure. Chris, let me ask you again. What's your favourite track in Project Cars?
I think Alton Park, because it's British and it's a quality track that is. Very, very technical, high speed at the same time. It can bring the worst out in the best drivers. Great track. Brings
the worst out in the best drivers. That's a nice way of looking at it. And then we have Jake making up our Final Four as well. Jake, congratulations for being in our Final Four. Do you feel any competition from these 3 other guys?
Well, yeah, surely. I mean, they've racked up the times on the time trials, so hopefully they're going to give it their all on the track.
Hopefully you're going to give it all on the track. That's what we want to hear. So it's 4 of you. It's going to be 5 races, and we have 2 brilliant casters to take you through all of this. They'll explain more about what we're going to have here in our EGX final. It's over to Yorkie and Jackie.
And here we are indeed, as Matt said. Me and Yorkie, we've been here all week, and now we're finally here in the final of finals. Are you excited, Yorkie?
Very excited for this one. Obviously, the last day as well as quite a bit of pressure riding on these guys already to provide the show for the grand final. The very last day of EGX. See some really good, interesting times coming out from these guys as well. And we'll touch on that very, very shortly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, the best of 5 final. Going into this, of course, we've done it a few times now. We've seen what kind of a beast this can be, but how are you feeling about this one? Are we really going crazy for the final here? The final of EGX 2015 for Project Cars. I want it to be explosive, Yorkie. What's it going to be?
Pretty explosive, I can tell you that now. So I'm just going to launch these guys off into the warm-up session. We're going to do that now, and whilst we're doing that, we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 drivers here. So obviously we've just done a quick introduction with the guys, and we're going to take a look at the times that they did in their time trial sessions. And I can tell you now that both Jake Thompson and also Chris Starsmore set exactly the same time as each other. They both did a 105.514 around Hockenheim short in the Ginetta GT4 car. Followed very closely behind them was Andre Bauhofer. He set a time of 105.783, so only nearly 3 tenths off. And then John Brown did a 106.010, so again only 3 tenths behind Andre. So we're looking at about 5-6 tenths here covering the 4 drivers that we have for this final. So it should be close, should be fun, should be very, very exciting.
Awesome. And then, of course, I mean, as we've said, this is a best of 5. There's going to be 5 different tracks,
yes,
5 different cars, and potentially an awful lot of room for some crazy weather conditions coming into play as well. So why don't you give me a little bit of a rundown of what we've decided to set things off with? What is the first track?
Okay, so obviously if you've been watching the stream at home the last 3 days, or if you have been here at EGX watching the last 3 days, we'll be running the same setup as we did yesterday. Same cars, same tracks, very similar sort of weather conditions. We'll be starting off the first race around the Brno circuit. We're going to be driving the BMW M3 E30 Group A car, and we're going to be driving it in the dry conditions. So something fairly easy to ease themselves into the first round. Try and get these guys settled down and see if we can get them comfortable and hopefully provide some good racing wheel-to-wheel action as well.
Awesome, awesome. So potentially a lot of room for some cool stuff coming out even in the first map here, and I believe the weather conditions this time around, we've kept it fairly simple. We don't want to do anything too wacky first of all.
We don't want to throw them into the deep end. They need to swim around and have a splash in the low.
We've got to make sure they've got the armbands, you know, the admins, they've been blowing up the armbands, making sure they're okay.
Yeah,
we don't want anyone to drown.
All seems good so far.
So should be good. So then Yorkie, around 3 minutes, just letting them rev up their engines, get nice and ready before we jump in. And now, as you said, you've touched a little bit on who these guys are and where they've come from, but
Yep.
who is the one you're really looking out for here, of course, from what we've seen with the earlier lap times that we got from the time trial?
Okay, so obviously our first two guys are basically neck and neck already, setting exactly the same lap time. One of those is actually Chris Starsmore, who was here on Thursday and was in the final for that. So it'll be interesting to see if he can actually improve and get a better finishing position than he did last time. It's looking pretty promising for him. Andre Bauhofer, he was originally positioned roughly about 6th during the time trials this afternoon. However, in the final dying moments just before we shut the time trial sessions, he had another go and he managed to sip himself up into the top 4. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep his nerves together and come out with a good result in this final. And obviously, John Brown, our 4th place driver, at the moment looking about 3/10 off his closest rival, Andre. But obviously, like we said in previous days, the time trial is very, very different to the actual races themselves. So different ball game here. And then obviously at the front you've got Jake Thompson. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold his what looks like to be an early advantage, see if he can hold that stance through these 5 rounds.
Awesome. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well, as you're saying, especially time trial, it is a whole nother beast completely. You've got a fairly standard track from there. It's very similar. Everyone basically has a level playing field, but going into this best of 5, this is where, as we've said, we're going to spice things up. There's no way that we're going to allow people to really sort of have that edge. It's going to be very different. And it's going to be really about who is the superior driver there, who can adapt the fastest to the things we're throwing at them, who's more experienced in the sense of the cars and even the tracks we're going to be pulling out. And Yorkie, do you feel like there's anyone that does seem to have a lot more experience, especially as well, you're saying with Chris Starsmore making a return? Do you feel like he could have a slight edge here over the competition?
Possibly. So obviously he was here on Thursday, was Chris, and obviously that's going to help him a little bit. He'll know how the format works. He'll understand the pressure, because obviously we've got the Twitch live stream here, we've got us shoutcasting for them, and then we've got the live audience stood behind them as well. So there is quite a lot of pressure riding on these guys, and the mistakes that we've seen in the previous races yesterday, the day before on Friday, and also of course on Thursday, have been pretty costly for a number of drivers in the races, especially in the final couple of rounds. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys can hold it together. Obviously we don't want to get them too settled, and we don't really want to get anything that we know one particular driver will have an advantage. That's why we're mixing everything up here with different tracks, different cars and different weather conditions. So hopefully the stage is pretty much set and we shall be going into the race very, very shortly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, probably around 10 seconds left and then we'll be getting in, and hopefully these guys have made enough of their warm-up time. I mean, if we have a little bit of a glance over what their lap scores were there, it's not looking too bad. Everyone looking actually fairly close considering, but I mean, we've said this time and time again, the actual warm-up time you get is so different to when you actually get in game, because that's when there's the pressure. And I mean, does that really affect you as sort of a player of Project Cars? Is this one of those things that can get you in these tense moments?
Definitely. I mean, it's very much how you handle the pressure. Obviously, if you can keep yourself calm, you're more likely to make less mistakes. So we're quickly jumping into the spectator mode now, as it now looks like we've got our 3 drivers going wheel to wheel, coming down towards turn 1. We'll see who will come out on top. We're currently following Jake Thompson at the moment, who has started in last position. All these drivers flowing through the first turn. Looks like they're going through fairly cleanly so far. A couple of changes for position, I believe, as we're now going to skip to Andre, who is currently in 3rd place, is having a look down the inside into turn 3, having a second thought about it, and now actually coming under pressure from Jake, who is looking to his inside. It's going to allow him room. We're going to go side by side once again through the next right-hander, and it looks like a couple of the guys are basically just trying to settle into a rhythm here, not trying to make too many daring moves down the inside, trying to avoid the contact as Andre goes down, having a look down the inside of P2. Plenty of room being given. Nice respectable driving here by both drivers. He's got the inside for this next right-hander. We're now going to go into this left-handed turn, and once again settling back down as P2 is a little bit slow on the power coming out of this long left-hander. 4th place is having a look down the inside of Andre. Will he be able to pull the move off? A little bit of contact there between the 2 drivers, but both of them managing to recover well and settle back into the positions that they were previously in. So taking a quick look at the actual standings, we got Chris Starsmore in first, we got John Brown in second, Andre Bauhofer in third, and then in fourth place is Jake Thompson. So some fairly interesting racing going on in the early stages of this race. It looks like Chris is starting to pull out a little bit of a gap to second, third and fourth behind them, but those three drivers are looking fairly close at the moment, and as we've seen, some possible looks for changes of position going on, as it looks like Jake is having a look at the inside of Andre here, coming into the penultimate turn at the end of this first lap. We're now going into the last corner. Tiny little bit of contact there, and it looks like Jake has just about managed to sneak off around the outside of Andre, but Andre is not giving up at the moment. I don't think, he's not quite far enough back to slip in the slipstream, so they're going to have to drag race it down into turn one. It's going to be all about who's going to be latest on the brakes and can get it turned into the apex of this first turn, and it looks like Jake has come out on top at the moment. Andre taking a wider line through the exit, trying to get on the power as early as possible and accelerate off down this straight as you go through the very fast flat out kink of turn 2. It's almost non-existent, and coming into turn 3 now, turn 4 shortly following. So the little battling going on there has cost these guys some ground. They have dropped back a little bit, accidentally cut them to ourselves in the pit lane there. So John B is in second. You can see Chris off in the distance, pulling that gap away. Will he be able to maintain it? It looks like he hasn't. He's had a slight moment, and now John has managed to climb right up onto the rear bumper of Chris. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next lap and a half of this race in round 1 here at Brno. So looking very, very close at the moment, less than a car length between these two drivers as they come accelerate out along down this hill, down into the next right-handed hairpin. It's quite a shallow hairpin, so you can carry some speed through it. Looks like John was getting a little bit later on the brakes than Chris just there, closing the gap up in the braking zone, potentially hoping to make a move coming in through the next set of turns, possibly coming down the start-finish straight into turn 1, just setting himself up, lining up for that overtaking maneuver. So getting a good clean run so far. Coming into the penultimate turn now, both drivers getting on the brakes, shifting down the gears, turning the car in, both of them hooking up the apex on the inside quite nicely there. Opening up the following turn, which is near enough flat out. You do lift ever so slightly coming into the entrance of that. The guys now accelerating down the start-finish straight, and it looks like we may have some issues here. There we go, the internet's popped back up. And now follow the guys back out on track. Again, it still looks like John B is holding second. Chris Starsmore is managing to hold John off for the moment in this fairly early stage of the final lap. Looks like he's starting to pull out a little bit of a gap as well. And there you can see the gap between the 4 drivers overall. Obviously, this is the first round. It's all to play for at the moment. We've got another 4 rounds after this one, so even if you finish last in this place, it's plenty of opportunity to work your way back up in the overall championship standings in the next 5 races and hopefully win yourself the all-important prize at the end of this championship. So it looks like John has closed up in 1 or 2 places in the braking zones, but Chris is managing to hold on to his lead quite nicely, and it looks like he's still starting to build that visual gap to John here in second, just following him through the complex of corners. Actually looks like Jake is actually starting to push quite hard and is starting to close the gap up onto John. However, he hasn't got much of the lap left to actually get up onto the rear bumper and make an overtaking maneuver, flicking the car into this hairpin and controlling the slide rather nicely. To continue now through the end of the second sector and into the third and final sector At the moment, John is still sat on the rear of Chris. A couple of car lengths between the two as we come into the penultimate corner now. Here we go, both cars getting the car tucked in quite nicely, coming through the final turn, and it looks like Chris is going to come across the start-finish line to win round 1 here at EGX. And if you just bear with us one moment. So in first place we did have Chris Starsmore, in second we had John Brown. Jake Thompson came in third, and then Andre Bauhofer finished in fourth position. So fairly good stuff in this first round. Obviously we've got round 2 coming up very, very shortly, but some good promising signs with some fairly good close wheel-to-wheel action. There's a little bit of contact here and there, but both drivers managing to keep the car pointing in the right direction. There was nothing too major.
Looking fairly clean though, as you're saying. I mean, compared to sort of what we saw yesterday, there was actually a fair bit going on towards the later end of the races, so better stuff there. And now it was a fairly good race, everyone coming in quite strong. But Yorkie, as we said, we will be switching things up throughout the entire event. And going into map 2, what can we expect here? What are you thinking? What is going through your mind that you really want to whip out and show off here? So
we are going to be racing in the Ginetta GT4 cars. These were the cars that they were racing in with the time trial. However, we're going to have some mixed conditions in this race. Just very quickly setting up the lobby, and we are going to launch the warm-up session now. So, like I said, Ginetta GT4 car is what they were using in the time trial around Hockenheim Short. However, we're going to be racing around the Zolder circuit this time. Hopefully, the way things are set up at the moment, in the warm-up session that they have, the 5-minute warm-up, they're going to be starting off in the dry, and it's then going to go to the wet. And we should see a similar thing with the race as well. It should start off pretty dry and then end up finishing with a wet race at the end. So it'll be an interesting challenge for these 4 drivers.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we were talking about yesterday as well with the weather conditions. Having it like that, where you get used to the track in a certain way, and then all of a sudden it's sprung on you that actually the grip and everything is completely wrong. You have to really rethink it and change it up, because, I mean, as you said, the track line changes completely when it comes to that point. Yeah, exactly. So what would usually be the racing line, usually the grippest line and fastest way around the circuit, when it becomes to the wet conditions, that line actually becomes more slippy and there's more grip offline. However, you've got to make a slight compromise with that, trying to find and look for the grip whilst also trying to get the fastest line around the circuit. So whilst the grip is there, you've got to trade it off with driving the slower line. So it'll be interesting to see how the guys are going to adapt to these conditions, see who is actually a very good driver in the wet and actually can keep the car under control and, you know, out the gravel, out the grass, and bring home a good result in round 2. Awesome. So some good stuff there. And, you know, again, one of these things where people need to be quick to adapt or they're going to fall behind, really. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys are going to cope with the weather conditions we're throwing in there. And the track itself, is this one where we're going to see the weather conditions really doubling up on the effect? We're seeing a lot of turnings going into this, or? Yeah, so the first sector is actually quite open, quite flowing. There's a couple of lines that they can run through the exit of turn 2 especially. And then coming into the second sector, it gets a fair bit tighter. The track's narrower. There's some fairly tight chicanes there, and obviously they've got to get the lines right, whilst also watching out for the curves, because the curves actually become rather slippery in the wet conditions. Then into the final sector, it opens up a little bit more. It's not quite as tight as the second, but it's not as open as the third. So it'll be interesting to see where the individual driver strengths will play out in those sectors, see who will capitalise on their particular driving style, and see who can make the best of the car in these tricky conditions. Awesome. So there is some good stuff coming out there in this track that we can expect, especially with the donors of the weather conditions. So the cars themselves, is this another thing that's going to be a major factor, or are we seeing fairly across the board nice handling here, or what have we gone for? So and handling wise, the car is pretty solid. It's got an awful lot of grip, especially on the rear, so you can get on the power pretty early, but obviously with wet conditions you need to be wary of that. Its front end is pretty good. Its top speed isn't all that great. It's a GT4 car, so it's restricted in that sense. Its power output isn't amazing. Its acceleration is fairly decent. It's good on the brakes. It's very much more
a handling-based car rather than a top-speed, heavy accelerating, big beast.
That's nice, but it still should be fairly good to see these guys get their hands on the wheel and give it a go with this car. So hopefully not too long at all, about probably around a minute until we're finally in game and then underway with map 2 of 5. And now, as you said, I mean, we've only seen one map so far, and of course, even if you did come in last place, do not worry, you've got a very long way to go.
Definitely, and obviously these conditions may actually suit a particular driver more than another. They may excel, feel particularly comfortable in the wet, therefore they can push and hopefully get a better result this time round. Obviously, 5 rounds, we take all the points and accumulate those that they work. So there's plenty of points still left on the board to get, and as we've seen in the previous days, we've seen some very, very close final points finishes, and a number of guys, we even actually had to do a showdown for 3rd place on the Friday. So ample opportunity for making a comeback in these 4 rounds that we have remaining.
It's true, I mean, and that's the thing as well, it's important to actually be able to peel ahead, even if it is just for 1 extra position, because I mean, we are giving prizes to everyone, but the idea here is of course to get in that top 3. Number 1, if you come first, you get that bigger trophy. If you come second, you get the slightly smaller one that goes down. It scales down depending on your placement, and I mean, the difference of, you know, maybe getting a t-shirt or a hat compared to getting that 3rd place trophy is fairly big, so you want to come in there and try and rack up those points. No reason to really lose confidence early on and fall back.
Yeah, definitely, because obviously all the drivers are going to walk away with something here. We have to give them something for actually making it into the final. But it is, like you said, Jackie, those top 3 places that are going to walk away with the trophies, and hopefully we can crown someone the champion on Sunday here at Project Cars EGX 2015. So I believe the warm-up session is now finishing, and we're going to jump into the race. So just bear with us for about 10 seconds time and we shall be in with that.
Yeah, we'll get underway with the 2nd race of the day.
Definitely. So here we are then, jumping onto the grid. As you can see, it's already raining here. Very, very wet conditions to start off with, so hopefully we shall see it dry out towards the end of the race. Just jump into the spectator cam. So jumping straight on board with Jake Thompson, sorry, as we come down towards turn 1. It looks like 1st and 2nd are dicing for positions a little bit here, going side by side. A couple of the guys taking a look to the inside as we'll jump on board with Andre, who is currently holding P1 and is going to run off wide into the gravel. Hopefully he can rejoin the track fairly cleanly. It looks like he's just about managing to do that and has got back onto 3rd place, slotting himself between Jake and also John. But Jake is now having a look down the inside into that right-hander there. As we come towards the end of sector 1, you can see the track is already starting to dry very, very quickly. Andre has managed to slip back onto the racing line in front of Jake. And the guys getting through the chicane fairly cleanly, no cut track penalties there. So looking fairly good so far. I'm going to take a quick look at the position board. So there you can see Chris Starsmore is in 1st place. John B cutting the chicane a little bit, taking out a couple of the bollards. And then Andre Bauhofer in 3rd and Jake Thompson in 4th. And it looks like John and Chris have swapped positions here as well, looking at the leaderboards. Chris is having a look down the inside of Jake into the next right-hander hairpin. I believe John is trying to close the gap on Chris, and he's just about managed to hold on to 1st place. There's less than a car width between the 2 drivers, so they have a little bit of slipstream as we come down into the final 2 corners of this 1st lap. Sat right behind them, lurking in 3rd place, is Andre. We'll see if he can potentially capitalise on any mistakes that these 2 drivers, any battling that goes on between 1st and 2nd, and see if he can retake that 1st position that he unfortunately lost on the 1st lap. So coming through turn 1 now of lap 2, all the drivers looking fairly clean so far, and John is managing to hold his ground and starting to pull out a little bit of a gap to Chris. who's following fairly closely, and there's a little bit more of a gap to Andre behind. And then I believe we have Jake Thompson in 4th, who is in the background in a couple of these camera shots, and it's now looking like the rain is going to start coming back in. A couple of water droplets forming on the lens of the camera that we can see here. Currently following John as he comes over the crest of the bridge, dropping down into the left-handed and into the braking zone of this rather tricky chicane. Both times track dips mid-corner, and it looks like John is going to got a 5-second cut track penalty, which has slowed him down. Chris Starsmore has slipped up into 1st place. Unfortunately, Andre wasn't able to capitalise on that just yet. However, he has got onto the outside of John and has now got the inside for this very tight right-handed hairpin. A little bit of contact there between the two drivers rubbing his racing, and it looks like John has dropped down into 3rd place. Andre has managed to slip up into 2nd. He's going to go defensive here into these final turns of lap 2. John has now switched back onto the inside. Andre has got the outside here, and it looks like John has gone and cut the track a little bit again. Has gone and got another 5-second cut track penalty. Now he can get back on the power and start accelerating away. And here we can see in the background, Jake has now actually slipped up into 3rd place, capitalising on the penalty that John had got himself. And Andre has managed to retain the 2nd place that he had momentarily gained, which I believe would have allowed our race leader of Chris Starsmore to slip up into the distance. Here we see Andre, and there goes Chris in the foreground of the picture there. It looks like these guys are trying to get to grips with these tricky conditions. Yeah, you can see the difference between 1st and 2nd place. Quickly cut to Jake in 3rd, and there's the difference between 3rd and 2nd. And jumping back to 4th place with John, who is hunting to look and retake 3rd position off of Jake. Is looking fairly close. He may end up having the inside line here. If he can hold it around the inside for the chicane, he's going to go for the move, getting on the brakes later. Will Jake give him room? Jake shuts the door, and John has to settle back into the rear of John in 4th place. Very, very close, less than a car length between the two as they come up over the bridge through the very fast left-hander. Will John make a move down the inside of Jake into this hairpin? Jake has gone defensive, trying to block that inside line and stop John from making the move. He's done that fairly successfully so far. However, we do have 2 corners to go in this final lap of round 2. John picking up the slipstream here, moving to the inside of Jake. A tiny little bit of contact. Both drivers managing to get the car settled. Will Jake be able to perform a switchback and get back past John? It doesn't look like it. It looks like John managed to get a good exit coming out of that final turn, and is going to get himself 3rd place in this race. So the results were as follows. In 1st place we had Chris Starsmore. In 2nd we had Andre Bauhofer. In 3rd we had John Brown, and then in 4th place was Jake Thompson. So Andre getting a much better result this time. He got 4th in the 1st round. He got himself a 2nd place in this 2nd round. Chris Starsmore taking 2 early wins in the first 2 rounds, so it's looking very, very good for him. And then Jake Thompson and John Brown having a pretty good battle there between the 2 drivers at the end of round 2.
Yeah, it's a good stuff then. I mean, and that's what we were saying as well about Andre, of course, coming in 4th in the 1st map. It doesn't matter. It's only the 1st map. Going into map 2, he's been able to get himself, secure that 2nd place. That's going to be bumping up fairly highly already with the score points. So he'll be not being too unhappy about that at all. So hopefully things are still looking good for everyone involved in the races. I mean, Chris Starsmore, though, of course, he's really showing that wealth of experience that he had from even the Thursday event, I believe, going into now. He's looking fairly drilled. Yeah, he's looking very, very confident. Some good, consistent racing by himself so far. All the guys showing good caliber of driving skills so far. But we shall see how this next race goes and how they're going to handle the conditions in this next race format that we do have. So we're just jumping into the warm-up session now. We'll briefly talk about the cars and
track and also the track conditions.
Yeah, about what we have here. And I mean, why don't we start sort of with the track conditions? What sort of thing can we expect here? Have you gone for weather, or are we looking more towards just nice sunlight?
Okay, so we have unfortunately had a slight technical error. We shall try and get this back up and running very, very quickly. But the conditions that we are going to be running in is going to be at night. We're going back to the dry conditions, obviously some reduced visibility. And if you can just bear with us one moment, it seems like the internet here at EGX is being a little bit temperamental.
Hopefully it shouldn't take too long, guys. Really sorry for anyone waiting at home, or of course even here, because we are live, as you said, from EGX 2015 in Birmingham.
That is correct.
So I believe we're just trying to get this sorted, guys. We might have to take a short break whilst we get it fixed, or it looks like we might be okay.
Yes. So I'll just get these guys back into the lobby.
We'll actually just go over to a short break, guys, and we'll be back once things are set up.